everyone, I'm Jon Evans. Welcome to a special episode of One-on-One. It's the image many people remember from Hurricane Florence in Wilmington. A group of emotionally and physically drained firefighters gathered in prayer outside a home on Mercer Avenue. They had rescued one man from being trapped inside the home, but they could not rescue the man's wife or his infant son. More than a year later, I sat down with a group of those Wilmington firefighters who responded to the scene that day. I'll introduce them to you as we go on during this interview. We talked about the dangers they faced trying to save Adam Johnson's life, the emotions they still carry to this day that they were unable to save Leisha Johnson or little Adam. And they also talked about why, when the conditions of the hurricane were at their worst and they were at their own discretion whether to respond to any calls, they did answer this call for help.
Attention Zone 3 Alpha, Engine 2, respond to 24 Mercer Avenue, 24 Mercer Avenue, cross street of Market and Wakefield. Reference entrapment, tree fell on the back of the house. People are trapped in the room, including a newborn and 2 adults.
Captain, you told me the other day that the storm was getting ready to make landfall, so you were at discretion at this point in time.
Yes, sir.
And you heard that. What went through your mind?
We had just responded to another call like that over off of Greenfield Street, and
This is Captain Shannon Preventure.
fortunately that was just a tree in the yard blocking the door. The lady wasn't entrapped. We tried to make it back from Greenfield Street back over to this side of town, and we couldn't come back the way we just went because of trees were down. It was a challenging effort just to even get back to this side of town. Talked on the PS channel to the guys that arrived. They did confirm, and so a little sense of urgency to get back there. It was just a challenge to get back to the scene at that time.
But you told me that when you heard the call, you knew it was something that you couldn't leave to anybody's discretion.
Yeah. Whenever there's children involved and stuff, that kind of tends to heighten up. Everybody, most of us have kids, and just a sense of urgency.
Did it register with anybody over and above any other calls that you might hear? Circumstances are hurricane, circumstances are everything else like that. Did it register anywhere deeper than any other calls you might hear?
I think it did.
This is Battalion Chief J.J. Norwood.
Because just the way it came out. We hadn't had anything, we had trees down there on houses and stuff, but the way the dispatcher said it and the way the storm was blowing up at that time, you could tell there was definitely something different going on. There was no doubt about that.
There's calls, there's dispatches that you hear, and it sounds like there might be some substance to it, and then there's dispatches that you hear and you go, that house is on fire.
Here's Battalion Chief Patrick Campbell.
There's no question by the way that came out. And the way this one was put out, I don't think there was any question in anybody's mind that there were people trapped in that house. That wasn't a, we'll go see what's going on. That was a, we got to get there.
As I look through the CAD report and as I listen to some of the dispatch, Firefighter Delia, I think I heard you trying to get there. You tried Wrightsville Avenue, you tried Oleander Drive, you've heard this call. What was going through your mind? It had to be somewhat tense driving that, or even riding in that vehicle.
Yes, we were coming from another call, and obviously the dispatch came out, and like Chief Campbell said, when you're getting that type of definitive information immediately, you know that we knew people were trapped in that house before we got there.
This is Master Firefighter Carmen Delia.
But the routes to get there everything was cut off. There were trees down everywhere, and we did our best to get there. The winds were high, heavy rain still, and it just felt like it took forever.
But I heard several of you guys on the radio as I got the report, and you guys were telling each other, Oleander's blocked, try Wrightsville, try Market. I mean, it was literally a network of guys out there trying to help you guys get there.
Absolutely. You know, we went somewhere and we knew we couldn't get through, and there was other rigs coming behind us. You know, we let them know, hey, you're going to need to try another route. We're having to turn around. So
I just remember we had just a straight shot down Independence, and then up in Mercer, you know, had to dodge a few tree limbs, but we were able to make it direct route there.
Here's Captain Adam Cumbo.
Pulled up on scene. It was still dark, so when we went inside, we were working off of just flashlights, trying to make our way through the back of the house. And I was driving the truck, so it was my job to support the guys inside with getting some lights set up. So I pulled drop cords inside and set up some portable lights, and you know, there until the rescue got there with some solid tools for us to work with. You know, I mean, we were just kind of working with our hands, digging through the rubbish.
When you went inside, Mr. Venezio, what did you see?
Initially, it was the frantic family.
Here's firefighter Eli Venezia.
A lot of them just trying to explain best as they could where they thought they were, and they were just very excited about the fact that this was going on. It was a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling. But once you stepped through the living room, as it were, that's when you started to see all the wreckage, all the tree limbs, everything just piled into just one big cluster of stuff. And that's where we had to start clearing and trying to figure out exactly where are we going from here.
Chief, you told me that they estimated that tree at 80,000 pounds.
That was the engineer's estimate and the record driver's estimate, somewhere in that range. I think it was more than that at the end of the day, but.
Take me inside when you got in there, guys. Does fear come into play at all? Because again, I heard some, you know, there's more here that they're trying to keep the tree from rolling. I mean, I can't fathom, but can you paint me a picture?
We, you know, if you look right here, you've got ceiling joists, you've got rafters, you've got roof sheet and shingles. You know, all of that was gone. It was like just on top of this room, you know, floor level. So, you know, we were looking at limbs, just had the tree across the bedroom, but the limbs from other trees, from that tree, you know, were just blowing all around. So it was definitely an unstable situation the whole time we were there, you know, and we could, as the sun come up and we started getting light, you know, from outside, you know, you could see all this going on around you. So yeah, it was definitely a sketchy situation.
And this was when heavy bands were still coming through here. So we, you know, the torrential downpour, the heavy winds is what they were all dealing with when they were first starting.
Hurricane gusts, yeah. Hurricane force gusts.
We had trees breaking in the yard behind us, and we're trying to figure out if one of the trees around the house was going to break.
Here again, Battalion Chief J.J. Norwood.
Because it wasn't just the solid trunk of the tree we were dealing with, it was the fork of the tree that they were supporting. And so with that happening and the wind shifting, that's where we started getting a little bit of roll and concerns about that.
The contact was with the father, Mr. Johnson. Does anyone remember what he was saying, contacting with him?
When we kind of dug down and made contact with him, and you know how he was pinned basically from his waist down.
Again, we hear from Master Firefighter Carmen Delia.
But you know, we were asking him, you know, questions. You know, who was in the room with him? Where are they? And you know, he was telling us that his wife and baby were in there. And you know, we just did our best to keep him calm while we worked. You know, it's an incident like that. You know, it takes a lot of teamwork, and you know, guys are doing different jobs simultaneously. you know, trying to figure out how to lift the tree, trying to stabilize the tree, trying to do patient care. We had an inside team, outside team. So, you know, there's a lot going on, very dynamic situation.
Could you tell fear in his voice?
Yes.
I believe initially on, you know, I went from working outside and inside and back and forth until more crews were able to get there.
Joining us again, firefighter Eli Venezia.
Once I did get inside and we had crews outside, I spent a lot of time talking with him, as Master Firefighter Delia mentioned. You know, while people were still working, someone was always talking to him and trying to keep him engaged and trying to, you know, keep him focused on what we were doing. He did have moments, I think, where he, I remember him telling us, you know, trying to focus on his wife and the baby. But he definitely did a great job of staying with us and talking to us as long as we continued to engage him and ask for help and where does it hurt and where, you know, doing the whole patient assessment. He tried to stay with us every single bit of that way. I was very impressed with the amount of fight that he had in him throughout the entire process.
With the guys inside, Captain, Chief, are you fearful for what they're going through inside? Do you have fear for your guys' safety when they're in there? And so what your guys are outside, they're actually in there. What are you thinking at the time?
Well, obviously, we have a job to do. You're really focused on that, but you can't get tunnel vision. You got to take the big picture in.
Once again, we hear from Captain Shannon Preventure.
We're lifting a dynamic load, which means the load can roll, move. We've got gusts of wind. You've got trees cracking all around you. You don't know if this tree you're working on, if it's trees in the yard next to you, what's fallen. Obviously, scene safety for everybody is a major concern. Just making access to there, because I remember cutting away roofing material and everything, trying to get to the side of the house because everything was just crumbled all around. We're using, you know, power saws. We know we got live bodies in there, and obviously you got to be real careful what you're doing. And it was just I don't know how to explain that. Challenging. It was challenging, a challenging extrication to say the least. Scene safety is number one. There was a few times we had to step back away from it because everything was shifting. We didn't want to injure ourselves because obviously if we injure one of ourselves, we just added to the problem. And we had a very big problem at that time.
Chief?
One of the problems we ran into, as Captain Preventure's talking about, is so we have an inside team and an outside team, as Firefighter Delia said. And so as we're strutting and supporting and cribbing the tree on the outside, we've got wind going on, but the ground was saturated. So every time we tried to raise the tree or support the tree, it would push the cribbing blocks down into the ground. So we would get a little bit of gain, and then we'd hold it for a couple minutes, and then we might lose it. And so in trying to make sure we kept the tree stable, to make sure they could work inside, because it was a hands-only fight for a while. You just sat there and they just had to dig and dig and dig, and then we started making a little progress. And you know, that was the major concern, like Captain Preventure said. It was dynamic. The tree rolled a little bit. We did lose the cribbing block at one point in time. We had to back out a couple times just for safety of everybody, because if one of our people gets hurt, that's not helping anybody else at the scene.
I heard the call, I'm not sure what time it came over. 7:27, so you guys are already there about 15 minutes. Whenever you guys get here, we're going to need six buys, and then somebody in the back yells, I have the audio, but somebody in the back yells, and wedges. We're trying to keep this tree from going horizontal. Would a rescue jack be a better option with the chains? Then I heard later you were talking about, Mr. Deal, I think you talked about airbags that you actually use. You showed me in the back of the vehicle when we were here. So you're trying literally everything at this point in time, right, Chief?
They were at that point. I came in the scene a little bit later on, but when I got there, Chief Norwood was basically he was kind of in operations mode, and he was handling the scene itself, the work that was going on.
Once again, Battalion Chief Patrick Campbell.
And I ended up kind of taking command of the overall scene, trying to coordinate efforts there. And and it's not funny, but when I got there, it looked like the rescue had just thrown up its equipment into the yard. I mean, the compartments were open, they were empty, and everything. They were using every tool they had at their disposal to try to stabilize this thing and lift. And you know, as Chief Norwood said, they'd make a gain and then it would sink, move, shift, you know, and it was frustrating. And these guys were at it for not you know, an hour or two, but they were at it for several hours. You know, to the point of complete exhaustion for some of them.
When you're inside, did it ever get to the point where you had fear for your own life, actually in the room itself?
There was one time when they had the tree cribbed up outside.
Once again, we hear from Captain Adam Cumbo.
I think we had lifted it, made a little bit of gain, and we had a wind gust. Because this tree, you know, was laying horizontal, but then it's got its limbs that are catching all the wind. But the cribbing block or tower shifted a little bit, and we were, and I remember, was there like 4 of us in there, and we were on top of each other trying to get out. You know, it was literally, you know, it's time to leave. Because it was, you know, that 80,000-pound tree, you know, inches from our head moving.
Ever been that scared before or since?
I like Camp Prevention mentioned earlier, you know, you're so focused on the bigger picture that, or at least for myself, I mean, you don't feel the fear or really think about it until that tree started to roll. And then I remember we all just fell back, and in that instant it became very real that, hey, we really need to pay attention to what we're doing here, because something's going to go wrong if we don't. But then almost as quickly as that happened, it was like, now you're back focused on the big picture again. And you're just not thinking about, I could get hurt here right now. And me personally, I think that's a good thing, because if that's what you're focused on, then you're not focused on that patient anymore. So if anyone was scared, I didn't see it.
The main thing we did when we did lose the load a little bit is we got out of the way. We did what we call a par check. Everybody okay? Everybody okay? Check with the guys inside. Everybody's good. Then we were right back on it just that quick. Once we knew everybody was good, we were right back on it. Obviously, like I said, being right up next to the tree, there's a little bit more concern, not only with the rescue going on, with our victim going on, but I was concerned about everybody else. And obviously, them putting themselves in dangerous situations. We already lost the load one time. What's going to happen? We were on plan D, E, F by this time, trying to lift that tree.
One of the things you asked about people being scared inside, I never saw once on any of these. You know, we had EMS personnel close by in the interior of the building.
Here's Battalion Chief Greg Fix.
Sal and Eli were both in there close, and we try to rotate couples, you know, companies in and out of there. But they're also relying on the training that they've done and the people outside stabilizing. So we, at that point, as Captain French said, we had taken some areas out where we could see the people who were stabilizing outside, and you know, they had a very rough time of it just because of the wind and as Chief Norwood said about the ground, you know, being so wet at that time. So you know, they were relying on each other. So I don't think anybody actually had the time to even really worry that much about it. We talked to, you know, Mr. Johnson the whole time, and not so much about about maybe surgically, but you know, we pretty much assured him we're going to get him out of there. You know, he was talking to us, and he'd slip in and out, but he would, you know, we had a plan, and I think after we regrouped and saw what we had, and granted, conditions changed at that point. We lost all, you know, the wind died down, so we were able to make, you know, a little bit of a different plan, you know, and like Captain French said, we were on, you know, maybe plan D or E at that time. So talking to him and assuring him that we were going to get that off him and get him out, that I think, you know, was a big part of it.
You've been in there a while. When was the decision made, and did you have to talk to Mr. Johnson about the only way we're going to get you out of here is to bring the surgical team in? Can anybody shed any light on that? Because you'd been in there, obviously, for the better part of almost 2 hours at that point in time when that decision came up.
That came up about because we didn't know what the extent of his injuries were.
Here again, Battalion Chief J.J. Norwood.
Like Sal said, he was crushed. We didn't know how much damage he had at the hips. And with the crush injury, we didn't know if once that tree was lifted, he was going to have a lot more problems. And so in doing that, it's one of the things that the paramedics and us had to talk about. This could be a reality. And the other thing that arose from that is now we're trying to get a team from the hospital to us, and they've got to go through all the challenges that we had to. So it became a reality just in case, because we didn't want to do all this good work, and these guys do all this awesome work, and then just for something really bad to happen when everything's been done to save this gentleman's life.
You've already figured this out, but for these guys, that wasn't an option. that was a contingency for EMS. These guys were getting him out.
Well, he was coming out.
And did you have to if you're going to take a person's leg, I would think you have to ask him, but how does that conversation go?
We didn't approach that with him because these guys we were getting reports from them as how it looked inside, and so the paramedic that was on scene in charge, he said, we'll wait to hear what they say, and we'll see if there's any indications that that's what we're facing. And then if that's the case, we'll have the team ready to go. It was never communicated to him that that was an option. We were trying to keep that as a last ditch, last resort.
There was a surgical team, a field surgical team brought in on a contingency that might have to happen, but like I said, for these guys it wasn't an option. They brought him out intact.
The tree was lifted enough to get him out.
How did you do that?
Well, like Sal was talking about with the airbags, we finally got a good surface on the foundation and up under the trees, so where we can lift, just a half inch and then an inch, and we're making little gains. And then on the inside, he was still on the mattress and the box spring had the tree across him, and then you've got the bed frame under that. So we're doing everything from underneath him to get him to drop while they're trying to get the tree up. So it was just a group effort of both teams to free his lower body until we were able to get him out.
You think about the mattress being under compression, right? Mm-hmm. So anytime we're getting a gain on the tree, that mattress is just coming up with him underneath him, so we're not making any progress trying to get him out. We had to stabilize the mattress, so whenever we would lift, we would actually get the lift to get him out. The paramedics approached me from the outside and asked about, they said the surgical team's here, do you think we're going to use him? I said, give us 15 more minutes and we'll have him out.
And to just sort of add to that,
Firefighter Eli Venezia.
As you mentioned here, we lift and we're talking about inches and this and the other, but I remember when Master Firefighter Delia and Combo and Captain Lamb, it was everyone pulling on him strategically, not just crazy. Right. And we had already raised everything we could. I had my hand under there on his leg, feeling the tree, the gap, and communicating between them, the outside, because at this point, they were saying, are we going to be able to pull him out? We've got as much lift as we're going to get, and we're pulling. And it was like holding your breath as long as you could, the entire call, and then it slipped. But there was never, oh yeah, we got 2 inches, he's going to come right out. But it was just all of a little more. Everything you've got, and you hear everyone saying it's maxed out, this bag's maxed out, that, we've got the lift over here, and I'm just a little bit more pull, and he's coming, and sure enough, it was almost like that last minute. All right, one more time, and that's when his leg came out. But it was never, oh, I can put my hand between his leg and that tree.
Was he conscious?
He was semi-conscious at that point. He was definitely communicating with us because we were talking to him and telling him, okay, this is it. We've got you. You're coming out. We knew at that point that this is essentially the most that we're going to get here.
What did he say?
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember his exact words. I do know that he was ready. he was ready, and he was in pain. But
because a couple times, like he thought that he was free to come out, but he wasn't. I mean,
once again, Battalion Chief Greg Fix.
From his hip to he was from the hips he was pinned. So, but when we finally did stop moving him, he knew that we were moving him. He's like, I just moved him. Like I said, as Eli said, it was just a little bit up and a little bit down was just that little bit that we needed at that point.
And he was worried about his family. He made the comment because we were bringing him out of the house.
Again, we hear from Master Firefighter Carmen Delia.
He just said, my wife and kid. And then we delivered him to EMS, and I told him we're going to do everything we can.
You had concerns that these guys had been working so long that you were going to swap out and let these guys take off, and then you realized that wasn't going to happen.
No, that wasn't going to happen. These guys weren't going to. They did. Yeah. I might not be sitting here if I'd have tried to have done that.
More now from Battalion Chief Patrick Campbell.
But we did, so at that point there was a task force out of Indiana Task Force 1 that had been assigned, and they were a Swiftwater team, but they'd been assigned down here as a part of the contingency for the storm. So contacted the county battalion chief, or he contacted me and said, hey, if you need some help from the task force, we can get an element of them out there. And so they did send, I think it was a 20 or 25 man element of the task force out to us. And even though they were a Swiftwater team, they came in, and as part of being a USAR team, they had a structural engineer, and he helped us with the estimation of the tree weight and some of the dynamics of the things that were going on there. And they had manpower, and they provided relief for these guys in manpower. So we had brought all of our resources into play that we could spare during this time. And those guys coming in, I called in a rotator wrecker, which was the heaviest wrecker that I could get my hands on. And between the wrecker operator and the structural engineer from the task force team, the estimation was 80,000 pounds on the tree. The wrecker operator was able to get that tree in the backyard of the neighbor's house, which I don't know how he put that wrecker back there, but he did. But it was not an ideal position. And he was not able to lift what his wrecker is capable of lifting, but he was able to put some lift and some relief on the tree and help stabilize it some. Actually, his truck was sinking into the mud just like our cribbing, so there was trouble, there was problems there. But that element of Indiana Task Force 1 coming in and providing relief for these guys and just manpower. I know when it was all said and done, these guys were just spent, and the guys from the task force were like, all you need to do is point, and we'll put all the equipment away. You just point and tell us where it goes. Don't lift a thing. You guys can probably speak to that.
Were you going to leave before you got them up?
Mm-mm. Nope. That was going to be a little bit of closure to that scene for all of us, I think.
Captain Shannon Provencher.
We worked so hard, and everybody was coming out before we left that scene. And I thought we'd been there just for a couple hours, but we were there for a long time. You just lose sense of time after that. And that's where these guys look out for us, because we're the workers,
Well, it was 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
It was.
I'm sorry, 3.5 hours before Mr. Johnson was actually brought in.
It was late afternoon before we finally cleared the scene.
And all the time I've been here, every one of the storms that I've covered, there's an image in my mind. The Fran and Floyd, the pigs floating up in Duplin County, and the damage in Topsail Island, and some of the other ones. Obviously, for this one, it was that picture of all of you guys outside in that circle meeting, and then the prayer. Everybody got down on their knees. Can you tell me when that happened in this whole process? What you guys were talking about? I think, Chief, you were telling me about it when we met last week.
Yeah. So that occurred after Mr. Johnson was extricated from the home, and he was taken by EMS, and we kind of stopped and just had a regrouping, and just kind of brought everybody together, and the Chief Martinet was on scene, our chief of our department. He was there, and he said some words, and everybody kind of came together. The mother and child had not at that point been brought out, and at that time they still couldn't make access to the mother and the child, and it was abundantly clear to me, kind of running that scene, that these guys were not going to leave until they got them out either. That was not even an option. So it was a kind of a regroup, and a prayer was said, and then it's time to get back to work to get them out.
10:47, after Mr. Johnson was brought out, Task Force 1 from command. Who was Task Force 1? Was that you?
Task Force 1 was the element from the Indiana Task Force.
Oh, okay. We still have, and then there was a pause, some work left to do with 2 confirmed deceased. That showed me exactly what you were talking about, that you guys weren't leaving that day until you brought Alicia and her son out.
That's right. That's right. We worked too hard, of course. It wasn't the outcome we wanted, but we're not going to leave anybody behind.
So how did you get started on the rest of the process? Could you...
That was the point. That was the point that we gathered everybody together and had a conversation, kind of quick game plan, kind of clear the air, say a prayer, and get back to work. And they were going to bring those other 2 out, period. And they did.
Were you still inside at the time after you brought Mr. Johnson out, Mr. Campbell?
Yes. Once we removed him, with just a little bit more digging, we saw her, and it was just immediately we knew that, you know, that she was deceased, and you know, that's kind of when we were able to slow down and, you know, really get a handle on everything. When everybody went outside, regrouped.
I saw the video and 4 or 5 different angles of it from different stations, but I saw emotion in the faces of big guys like you.
Yeah, it takes a toll on you. It does. Obviously, it wasn't the outcome we wanted, but it's you just got to hold it together. And,
but is this one of those that sometimes it's just too difficult to hold together? It's got to come out at some point in time. After you got him out, was there that second where you could breathe?
A little bit, yeah. We got him out, and that was a win for us, you know, considering what the options were for him. But you know, of course, we wanted everybody to come out, and whenever the inside team did confirm, you always kind of suspect that whenever we're doing it, because there was no contact during the whole time with the other 2. But you always give them the benefit of the doubt, and we're not going to stop until we can get eyes on them.
So how did you go about getting them out? Do you have to act, maybe not with the same amount of urgency, but with the same engineering that you're talking about to try to get them out?
100%. You still take everything in consideration. Now we're more focused on our safety. Safety from everybody, but you're more focused on our safety, and you're more methodical of what you're doing, because at that point it was just going to be recovery.
And you told me that you literally cut the floor out.
Yeah, we had to cut the floor with chainsaws, both sides of the bed, and at the head of the bed, I think it is. We had to cut the floor to drop the bed into the crawl space while the tree was stabilized and recover the bodies.
And what allowed you to do that? Because I know the storm was moving at 0 miles an hour, so you had, if there was an eye, I guess it was arriving about that time. But did the conditions allow you to be able to do that didn't allow you to do that earlier? Or those of you who are, I mean, I'm just trying to...
Conditions allowed it to do is that we were able to move more debris. Okay. Like you said, we were able to finally start getting on the foundation of the house. Before, we were just lifting with our equipment. And like Chief Norwood said, it was just, we had to use ground pads to try to spread the surface area out, because we were losing whatever we were lifting. Like those tools were sunk good six inches into the ground at least, and it was challenging.
At that point, we had the crane had the tree,
yeah.
But we also, with the task force, we trimmed a lot of the top of the tree off to get some of the load, some of the weight of the load down a little bit.
Battalion Chief Greg Fix.
And then so that we were able to keep the tree up, and then the theory was just to cut the floor joist, to drop the floor down and drop the bed, and that was enough to make the recovery.
It was a stop and regroup, and then continue working and make incremental gains to allow to get to the point where they could.
But the tree was more stable at that time, because what we're doing right now is you're lifting a round tree essentially with a pillow that's going to blow up into a ball. So you can imagine the instability of that, two round objects trying to lift each other. So at that time, like Chief said, the load was stabilized a little bit better with the wrecker, and we were able to do that.
But it took a lot to get there. I mean, we had to remove the whole wall to the outside to get. The whole wall was moved to get to the floor joist. It was a lot of work to get to it. It wasn't.
So you removed the wall of the house?
Yes.
That was still intact. We removed the wall of the house to able to get into the house to do that.
When you were finally able to reach Mrs. Johnson and the baby, and you finally got them down, I think, Chief, it was you that was telling me that when you got ready to bring them out, you wanted to make sure that everybody was kind of back and gave them room, I think is how you put it that day?
Well, so these guys had worked so incredibly hard all day.
Battalion Chief Patrick Campbell.
And then the members of the task force, one from Indiana, coming in and providing the relief and the manpower and some expertise, had assisted in that. And no offense to the media, to you, but I wasn't going to let the cameras capture the image of them being brought out. So we asked the police to relocate the media so that they didn't get a camera angle on bringing out these two. And these men put them in a Stokes basket, and they laid the baby on the mother, and they covered him, and we carried him out behind a blue wall of firefighters and put him in an EMS unit.
Anybody remember that moment?
Yes. Going back just very briefly to the cut, there was a lot before that moment.
Joining us again, firefighter Eli Venezia.
And you knew that moment was coming? Were you going to take him out? And I remember it was myself and firefighter Owens out there after we got done cutting the floor, and we're able to, like Chief Campbell mentioned, you know, everyone was already in their positions, their lines, make it quick and as professional as possible. For both of them, that decision was made to grab them both and essentially pass them into the Stokes basket and then pass them along. But it was a difficult moment for sure.
Chief, I'm noticing that you're looking elsewhere.
It's not a fun thought.
Once again, we hear from Battalion Chief J.J. Norwood.
These guys worked so hard, and to see that mom and that baby come out was amazing, but it was not the outcome we wanted. And to see the respect that was given is it's impressive, but you knew it was going to happen anyway, because these guys were not going to let a great job get spoiled, and they did everything they could to make it as respectful as possible.
Chief Fix?
Yeah, you know, the one thing that I remember is, you know, once that's all finished and the job's complete, I remember looking around. We had Chief Campbell, we had the BBC was riding with us for the whole storm. And so when I got there, I had to unmic and everything to go interior, but when I came back out and everything was done, they wanted to talk again, and I couldn't talk to them. I mean, it was the adrenaline levels down, and then you see how now everybody has been there for hours working on this, and, you know, you can look at it, you know, on some things where successes and I don't want to say failures, but for us, we're going there for one thing, you know, to pull out people. And so the end of that is a rough thing. So when the adrenaline goes down and you think the job is good or bad, and you look at everything you've done, and to see the faces on all the guys who are now just one out after that, and, you know, as Captain Prevention said, a lot of these guys have kids, you know, for them to see that, and especially the younger guys in this department who haven't dealt with that in a whole career, the older guys who have seen that multiple times, you know, to see that on their faces and know that that's what they're thinking about. They're thinking about their kids that they have at home or their infants that they have at home, and that's a rough thing to swallow and a rough thing as chiefs to see your guys see something like that is a rough thing, because you know that that's going to be with them the rest of their career.
Captain, you talked about that when we met last week, and I noticed as you talked about it, you started to get a little emotional all over again, that moment when you brought them out.
Yeah, that's something that's never going to leave you. It's something that's never going to leave you. You remember sight, smell, you remember all this stuff. It's weird how you never forget some things. But you got to move on. You know, it's always going to be back there. You just got to move on because you got a job to do.
Sal, you were, as they came in, and I noticed you in the back, as the chiefs were talking, I noticed looked to me like you were putting yourself back in that second when they came out.
You know, it's I hate to say it, it's, you know, the feeling of defeat. You know, these guys, you know, they work so hard to get the outcome that we want, which is to save lives. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. And you just feel emotionally defeated. And, you know, to see this Mr. Johnson, you know, have to come out alive and go on without his family is it's devastating. And, you know, my heart goes out to him.
So, you know, I don't remember what the period of time was. I think it was 10 days or even 2 weeks before there was a visitation and a funeral for the mother and child. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was some period after the storm, and we'd gotten back to recovery mode. Certainly not normal, but Chief Robinson sent us information about the visitation for the mother and child, and I would say the majority of people that were on that scene went to that visitation. I don't know how many went. Pretty much everybody. Pretty much everybody gathered up, put on our fancy blue and white shirts like we have on today, and went to the visitation. And that was voluntary. But I think for each one of us, it held a different meaning, and I think it was important for a lot of us to go there.
What did it mean for you guys?
It meant that even in that defeat, there was some positive. I remember talking to him and some of the same family members that were in the house, and it was hard. They did most of the talking because I could not, but to see them from that day to this day, it was very bittersweet. I mean, it was good to be able to be there and to speak with them, but at the same time, you just wish it was with better circumstances, or, you know, wish the whole time that you were meeting them at the hospital where their family's still being treated instead of under those circumstances. But it was
and that's a rough thing if you hear what Sal and Eli said, and I think Chief Norwood said, you know, you hear the word defeat a lot, you know, and some people wouldn't think that, you know, Mr. Johnson's walking on the planet today because these guys did an outstanding job. Unfortunate for his wife and child, that their outcome was already decided before we got there.
I think there's no doubt about that.
You know, and that's at the break, that's what I tried to tell the guys, is that what they did was a win. They saved a man's life. You know, he would not be here if it was not what they did. And but you still hear how hard they take on someone that happened before they got there, that they weren't. They still look at that as defeat because it's a very tough pill to swallow sometimes. Sometimes that's the easiest thing. The bell rings and you go to another call. That's what we do, and it's what we're trained to do. So.
Actually, it's how do you not do that? It's really the question. Because there's still work to be done. These guys came back, and Chief Robinson had come by, and and made sure that, you know, that nobody wanted to talk, and nobody really does at that point. I don't think typically it's time to start venting, and because the storm's still going on and calls are still coming in. So you tell the guys, hey man, get a shower, get a dry uniform on, you know, get a little downtime, put it out of service for a little while if you have to, and when you're ready, get back in service and start running calls. They probably took a couple hours. They're back in service, they're back running calls.
And at that point, from then on, like, the multiple bands started coming through again.
Yeah.
But even that whole, you know, that whole following week was, you know, I don't know if the public knows how busy we were. You know, that 4 days of the storm, after that, we were extremely busy. You know, as power came on, and, you know, we were isolated, we had water rescues, we had, fires, we had, we were very busy that whole following, week after. So, you don't think it's a good thing, but it's actually a great thing for the guys to do what they're trained to do and love doing.
Captain Fisher, you told me that there are images from inside that you will likely never forget.
Most definitely.
Can you share?
Just, I don't know. It's tough.
Can any of you share the images that you'll never forget?
I'll tell you, the most surreal feeling I've ever had is walking in there to see Sal and those guys trying to work on digging the family out, and we hadn't even started an outside project yet, and the family members standing right there because they couldn't go anywhere. Hurricane was going on, and we're sitting here having our conversations about what we're looking to do, and they're just standing there. I've never had that happen before, and they were just, I mean, obviously they were a little bit shocked and stoic, but it just kind of really threw me off. You don't expect to see that while we're doing our job.
Did you try to protect them from what was happening?
They had definitely moved towards the front of the house, but they heard everything we were doing. We kept our conversations, professional and low, but still, we're moving a lot of equipment in and out, and they're just watching us try to do this. And just something I'll never forget is seeing them just stand there and watching us.
Any other images from inside? Mr. Delia, Mr. Cumbo, any images that you will never leave you?
We'll definitely we'll never forget it. Teamwork is everything, and like I say, these guys just did a amazing job to free Mr. Johnson, and unfortunately, the outcome wasn't what we wanted, but we're here for the public, and we've got to go on because at some point somebody else is going to need us, and we're going to be there.
One for me that I just will put out because it is one that is definitely etched in there is when we got to the mother and the baby, I mean, it was very peaceful almost to see it because she was holding, and it stuck out because of where they were in relation to Mr. Johnson. They were all right there. I mean, when I saw exactly where the mother and the baby were, it just killed me how close we had been working around them the entire time. It was, but they were just very peaceful.
Does that give you a sense of peace, relief?
I don't know. It definitely makes you feel something, but it gets lost in the process or something when you're trying to compute it all.
How easy was doing this today? Or how difficult was doing this today? When I got a hold of Natasha and she asked who would want to be a part of this.
This wouldn't be easy for any of us if it weren't, even if it weren't about this kind of delicate subject. This is not this is not our forte by any stretch.
Understand. But talking about what happened.
Well, to say that, it's not even easy to begin with, and then to ask guys, that don't have feelings to talk about their sensitive feelings. It's.
But you're human beings.
Yeah, I don't know.
but, this story got national news, right? It's national news. The hurricane was here. Outside media was here. This department goes to those calls, not every day, but in a career you go to multiple calls like this that you see. So this one is just like to hear Eli talk about it, or any of the guys talk about it. You know, we go to motor vehicle crashes that have similar outcomes. We go to structure fires that have similar outcomes. We go to things like this in a career that, you know, that goes, I don't say unnoticed, but that the public doesn't see or the media doesn't see on a, you know, on a daily basis. Doesn't any day you come into work on this job, that can happen to you. And so, you know, I think if you ask us about this incident, I think someone look back at some other incident in their career that was worse to them, or that's what they're thinking.
It's a snapshot in the file, you know. I mean, I can go through my Rolodex, and it's a snapshot of this one and a snapshot of that one, and this is just one of those in a whole career's worth of bad things. And somebody's talking the other day, I can't remember who it was, but they were like, you know, I mean, it's just a terrible, terrible shame that the child, that the baby wasn't in the crib, because the crib was untouched. But the way the house came down, was that you, Captain? Right? So the crib, had the baby been in the crib's untouched. Baby would have lived. Would have been a better outcome. It's a hurricane. Wind's blowing hurricane force plus. Baby's in the crib crying. Where's baby going to go? In the bed with mom and daddy. Life's not fair.
Talk about being hard to bring in us to talk about this particular incident.
This is Captain Mike Browning.
We're going on a year later, and we can recall every single detail of that incident. We can also recall every single detail of 100,000 other incidents. And that's what we carry. We carry that every day as we go out and do the work we do for our citizens. We carry all those calls and all the poor outcomes, all the tragedies and all the triumphs as well. This one gaining national attention. The community wants to know what happened, and we come together to tell that story because they want to have that closure as well, and we understand that because it's a closure from 100,000 calls that we don't truly get to feel. So we understand it would be nice, and that's why we're here, is to make sure that everybody has that closure and respect the family and the hard work that these guys did and the phenomenal efforts that were put forth in truly arduous conditions.
But do you have the closure?
I'll truly never have closure on that event. It's much like a lot of other events that we go to. You have understanding that that's just how things are, and that we see these things so that other people don't have to. So if I'm there taking care of this event, that means that some other person's not filling my shoes and would have to see the things that I see on a daily basis.
Well, when people call us, we're not going to a good event.
Yeah, they're having a bad day to begin with.
So when people call 911, you know, we're going to things that are not good. But one of the things is you can hear how, as everybody reflects on different things, we go to a lot of, you know, Mr. Johnson being saved was a great thing. You know, we pull people out of car wrecks all the time. We have rescues out of fires. We bring people back from cardiac arrest or choking. We deliver babies. I mean, we have a lot of good things in our career.
There's positives.
But if you can see what everybody hangs on to is not the good things. It's, hey, you know, what were the bad things? So that's what you do hold on to inside most of the time. You know, you can say that, hey, someone's walking this planet because we did a good job, but most of the time you're thinking about some of the other things that went on in your career.
You help yourself, you help each other through them?
Oh, God, yeah.
without each other be a lot tougher?
Absolutely.
For
It's a
sure.
lot tougher on us and our families.
Right. You know,
Because you know, I remember going back, my wife helps as much as she can, but she would even say, you know, have you talked to Cap? You know, have you talked to Sal or Master Firefighter Dave? Have you talked to Chief? And, yeah, you know,
You're big, tough firefighters, though.
But it helps to be able to talk to people like who relate, you know, and that's, I think, is a problem, you know, with people, you know, in police, fire, EMS, military, you know, to be able to talk to someone who knows what you're talking about, who's kind of lived that same thing, is a big help.
I'm not sure that the doctors and therapists would tell you that we do it in the most positive, productive way, but we kind of have our own
Peer support.
peer support. Yeah, our own. We call it kicking each other when we're down.
One of the things I heard is that, like,
that's
when we
not
get counselors, if we
yeah.
get counselors from the outside come to talk to us
They have
about
to
our
have
stuff,
counseling.
They need counseling after, because they hear the stories and they leave there crying. They just have no idea what we actually do for a living, what we see. So they're just,
When I sat around the table last week and I saw this big guy tell me about the crib and then see his eyes go away, I was looking at Natasha and then I was looking at the chief next to me and I'm like, man, I hope I don't start crying.
you asked about how hard it is. Take a look at the picture of how many guys were there.
Yes.
Big, strong guys, a lot of them. Every one of them should be up there, in my opinion. I mean, everyone worked hard, but that's how hard it is. That even now, a lot of them we've dealt with it. It's where it needs to be.
I hope I handled this tactfully. I hope we handled it, and I hope it was in no way too intrusive. But I appreciate each and every one of you guys being willing to sit down here today. Again, I don't know how you did it, and I don't know how you do it. But on behalf of 250,000 people who call 911, thank you for what you did that day, and thanks for what you do every day. If they don't tell you thank you, I will on their behalf.
It's our pleasure.
And it's our pleasure.
I want to thank all of those Wilmington firefighters for being willing to sit down and share their emotions of that day last September. I did get a chance to talk with Leisha Johnson's daughter, China, in the lead up to the interview, and she told me she would want to tell those firefighters thank you for their efforts that day. Lester Holt, the anchor of NBC Nightly News, was in Wilmington to cover Hurricane Florence and actually was on the scene at Mercer Avenue as everything unfolded. When I interviewed Lester for this podcast earlier this year, he told me he still has the picture of the firefighters praying on his iPhone, and he called that scene one of the most touching things he has ever seen. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please download and subscribe to the One-on-One with Jon Evans podcast on whatever app that you use to listen to your favorite shows. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a rating or a review. We really do want to know what you think of the interviews that we do. And the more ratings and reviews we get, the higher we'll be listed on those podcast apps, and the better chance we'll have of bringing in even more new listeners. I'm Jon Evans. Thanks so much for being with us for this special episode of One-on-One.